Welcome, everyone. Can you hear us okay? Can you hear me okay? Okay. I have a couple of very quick remarks I'm going to read for the radio, but then I'm going to ad-lib it because I really love this book, and I just want to talk about it for a moment. Hi, everyone. Welcome to tonight's conversation at In-Forum at the Commonwealth Club. I'm Barry Eisler, a novelist, blogger, and former CIA. I'm excited to be speaking with the author and illustrator of the graphic novel Verax, The True History of Whistleblowers, Drone Warfare, and Mass Surveillance. Author Protap Chatterjee is an investigative reporter on U.S. warfare and technology, a popular television commentator, journalist for outlets including The New Republic, The Financial Times, and The Guardian. Illustrator Khalil Bendib is a former political cartoonist for the San Bernardino Sun, the co-author of the New York Times bestseller Zahra's Paradise, and co-host of the podcast Voices of the Middle East and North Africa. The universe of mass surveillance, drones, whistleblowers, and espionage is a complex one, and Protap and Khalil have taken history, stories, and more, and leveraged illustration to even more fully engage the reader. So I have to say, this is the fourth, maybe fifth, Commonwealth Club event I've moderated, and the truth is I don't always have time to read the whole book that is under discussion. I always spend a lot of time familiarizing myself with it. I want to do a good job as a moderator, but time is tight. Sometimes I'm under a deadline, and I don't always get to read the whole thing. Well, the moderator sent me my copy of Verax back in September, and I didn't really know what to expect. I'm reasonably familiar with the topic of whistleblowers and mass surveillance, but I just didn't know how one would tell this story in a graphic novel. And in my mind, I was thinking this was going to be fiction because the graphic novels I know are fictitious. I started reading this and I was like, oh, Julian Assange. Oh, that's cool that they wove him in there. And then someone who's in the audience tonight, Lisa Ling, a whistleblower. And then Glenn Greenwald and Laura Poitras. And I was like, this isn't fiction. So I'm a little slow on the uptake, but I couldn't put it down. It reads like a thriller, and take my word for it because I write thrillers for a living. It's just a terrific book. I loved it. And so, guys, I'm so excited to be here with you tonight and getting to talk with you about it. First question, I know it's the most obvious. Why a graphic novel? Laura Poitras made an Oscar-winning documentary. You've got Glenn Greenwald's book, Citizenfour. You've got Glenn Greenwald's book, Nowhere to Hide. Oliver Stone made a biopic about Snowden. The story's been told in various formats. As far as I know, this is the only graphic novel telling of the incredibly important and relevant story of mass surveillance in America and all over the world today. Why a graphic novel?
Well, we started before them, but we were so slow that we finished after them. So they beat us to the punch, all of them.
I'm glad no one else overtook you.
Oliver Stone beat us. Laura Poitras beat us. Everybody.
It just shows you that a graphic novel takes a lot of love and care.
It's mostly my fault because I'm so slow. But this was also a very complex operation. I came up with the idea originally when Snowden came up with his revelations in June 2013. I had finished a previous graphic novel by the name of Zahra's Paradise, which was a New York Times bestseller. It was in 16 languages, and I wanted to continue with something just as exciting. And I was focused on whistleblowers. I was really inspired by them. Chelsea Manning used to be Bradley Manning. At some point, I was thinking I'm going to do a graphic novel about him back then. Didn't happen, but when Snowden finally revealed all the stuff that he did, I thought, I know what I'm going to call. I'm going to call Protap Chatterjee, whose beat I know this is. Protap, I've been working with Protap for many years on mostly political cartoons. But I knew that he was following this track, this mass surveillance, drone warfare and all that he knew people like Julian Assange, Laura Poitras. So I gave him a call, and he accepted. So we decided to do this together.
It was actually very interesting for me because even though, of course, as a child, like any child, I read comic books, I've never written a graphic novel before. So I had to learn how to do it. And I discovered it's actually like writing a thriller, a movie, or a play, actually, which I was familiar with. However, it's a lot harder because you have to squeeze real life into it. And real life is more complicated than, it doesn't have clear beginnings, it doesn't have clear ends. Yeah. The beginning of the book actually was written long after we started. The middle of the book is the beginning of the book. And then we Also, the other problem with this is it was unfolding in real time. So every week I would come back. We met every Wednesday afternoon. I'd be like, guess what happened? And clearly, like, we can't put that in. But we actually the book actually ends in March of 2017. So it includes Trump,
Right.
who threw us for a loop. We were like, well, what is he going to do about drone wars? Is he
Right.
going to stop him? Is he going to ramp him up? And we addressed that in the book.
Yeah, probably not.
And so I had to train Pratap a little bit in the graphic novel 101 thing, because he hadn't read or even thought about graphic novels before. He'd read comics when he was a kid. The graphic novels he wasn't familiar with.
I'm the same way. I mean, I've read graphic novels. I've read The Sandman and V for Vendetta.
Yeah.
I know the format, but if
Exactly.
somebody were to say to me, Barry, you know a decent amount about mass surveillance and whistleblowers, write a graphic novel, I just wouldn't even know how to go about it, which is part of why I was so fascinated by this book, because it's a huge story. And yet somehow you tell it in such a, on the one hand, concise, but at the same time, really compelling and comprehensive way. I was, like I said, I had a hard time putting it down.
So we
Phil-
can
yeah.
we can blame Mouse and Persepolis and Joe Sacco for this, because they together started this new fangled genre.
Yeah.
Really, before Mouse, I think there wasn't the term of graphic novels. I grew up reading comic strips, which was
Yeah,
just
same.
fantastic work by, wasn't just for kids back in Europe. But the graphic novel really, as a genre, more literary, not necessarily all done by fantastic artists.
Right.
But people are good enough, clever enough to draw the stuff and write at the same time. And finally, after those two blockbusters, Mouse, first of all, which got the Pulitzer Prize, and then Persepolis, which also went worldwide, was
Right.
extremely popular. Joe Sacco happened. This guy in Portland, Oregon,
I don't know the name.
his name is Joe Sacco. He invented a new genre within that genre, which is now known as graphic journalism or
Comic
comics
journalism.
journalism.
Right.
And nobody had thought about it before, certainly not I. I was
Right.
thinking, what does journalism have to do with comics? I
Yeah.
mean, that's almost two opposites, right?
Yeah.
One is concerned with accuracy and all that. Comics could be about humor, it could be fantasy, poetry, all you want.
That was always my impression too.
Exactly. But this guy kind of brought the two together in a book called Palestine, then another one, Gorazd
Gorazd
or
Bosnia.
something.
He's
Yeah.
not allowed writing about Bosnia.
Really serious stuff, and a little bit like we did here, which is recount what was happening in those countries. He would go there and do journalism
Right.
in comics form. So he opened up a wide new door for people like us. And I thought, hey, I'll try the first one. My first one, Czar's Paradise, was fiction, but this one had to be nonfiction. And
Right.
that's why I called on Pratap.
So it's funny, in retrospect, it seems you did such a great job with this that I come away from it feeling like, God, isn't it obvious? A graphic novel is a perfect format to tell a story like this because you told it so well. There are so many characters, there are so many interlocking pieces that to try to go deep on every single one, particularly if you only have text as your medium, I think it would be overwhelming. It could be sprawling. Whereas here, you really knit everything up nicely. And Pratap, I'd like to hear a little bit more about the different pieces you saw as a journalist for this story. Obviously, there are the whistleblowers, but then there's a corporate angle, obviously government. How do you see the whole mosaic of mass surveillance?
Sure, I work for a nonprofit called CorpWatch, and so we follow, and the work I was doing with Julian Assange was looking at surveillance contractors, companies who are in the business of selling technology to hack your phone, to track you, and that sort of thing. So this is a subject I knew about. I was also interested in drones, and I wanted to investigate it.
So you started more with the corporate angle.
I
the
did.
Corporations that make this sort of tracking technology.
Exactly. And there was a seminal event, which the book opens with, where I go with a group with a nonprofit called Reprieve to Pakistan, and I meet all these relatives of people who have been killed in drone strikes. And one of the people I meet and I film, 3 days later, is killed by the CIA. And the CIA even acknowledged it to the Washington Post. So I thought I needed to get to the bottom of this technology. And it's not easy. Most people think, technology is magic, right? We all believe that, my phone can get me places, and therefore, surely it can find terrorists. Well, actually, that's not true at all. And so I dug deeper and deeper and deeper, and so I had to go talk to engineers. And then I had to talk to people in the military, because this book, Virax, just in case you didn't know what the word means, it's Latin for truth teller. It's one of the code names that Edward Snowden used when he talked to the Washington Post. And we thought that really kind of summed up our book, because it's about whistleblowers. It's about people who work for the government, who work for the military, and who want to actually tell people what's wrong. And in fact, I want to call somebody out in the audience. One of the people in the book is actually right here, Lisa Lane.
Yes.
She's a veteran of the U.S. military and was there for 20 years. And then she blew the whistle and talked about how drones were killing people. So to me, I just had to tell their stories in some ways.
Yeah.
And so, as you know, a good story is generally told through the medium of people. And so we used people. And of course, the advantage of having a cartoonist is you can illustrate them and you can draw things. We had a lot of fun, drawing an elephant and saying, this is like the people in intelligence are like blind men who are trying to explore an elephant, right? And so they feel the elephant, and they feel a ear, and they feel a trunk, and they don't know what it is. And when you get that each of the things that they are looking at are different and they don't show the whole picture, you start to understand, why this is a problem. Right. And so this is what we sought to explain. I think I've lost trace of your question.
No, that's that's exactly what I wanted to hear. So Protap, you're a character in the book. And so...
Much to my...
My fault.
I didn't want to be in the book.
No.
I thought it could be an object of fun, perhaps.
I loved it. I thought it worked so well. We all just met tonight. These guys know each other. That's the
Right,
first
we
time
know
I've
each
met.
other very well.
But this is the first night I met these two gentlemen, and so I feel like I got to know you as a character in the book, and you are a central character in the story, trying to track these things down, often over your editor's objections or on interest. Why do you think there is not more interest among editors in big news corporations about what I would consider to be one of the most important stories in the world?
So I'll tell you, I work with a lot of journalists because I'm somebody who works with non-NGOs and I follow detailed stories. Reporters often call me up and say, hey, something just broke in the news. What do you know about this? Or do you have any good ideas? And I'll send stories their way. And sometimes, it's on the front page of the LA Times, the New York Times. But I remember writing about a company called L3. It's in New York, and they're a big intelligence contract. And I told a reporter of the New York Times about it, and he went with it. His name is Scott Shane. He's a very famous journalist. He thought it was a good story because it explained how this company got the contract to interrogate people in Guantanamo. Right. And then his editor said to him, dead bodies? Are there any dead bodies? Smoking guns? We only care if, there's some kind of major conflict, right? And so, interestingly, the book wasn't about drones to begin with, and this is actually how I came in. The book was about Edward Snowden. And then as we wrote it and Khalil convinced me to be in it, I was like, well, I actually don't know Edward Snowden. So if you want to talk about my story, you have to talk about a much bigger picture. And he's like, well, that's really important. Yeah. And Snowden alludes to it. He says, the reason I care about mass surveillance is because it's used to kill people. But he doesn't go any further. In this book, we hope will tell people how mass surveillance is used to kill people.
Right.
Yeah, the book for me, as the title indicates, was about truth tellers. That's what really excited me. There are people courageous enough to devote their lives to it. I mean, at the cost of great cost, personal cost, to their families, to their freedom. Yeah. That's what really motivated me to do the book. I really admire and I'm inspired by these people. But halfway through the book, we decided, look, it can't just be about. We need to open it up to the second half of our exploration here, which is your job, your work, your beat, which is the drones, because we all know by now, thanks to Snowden and people like that there's a problem of democracy. When the government spies on every one of us, and they're not supposed to, they're doing it against the law. We don't know what they use it for, maybe to keep us from expressing ourselves down the line. We don't know exactly what they're doing. We're all familiar with that story by now, in large part thanks to Snowden and Poitras and Glenn Greenwald and others. But we didn't really hear about the second half, the second shoe to drop which was, they use that same technology to actually kill people, and very often innocent people. And that's a problem. So Protap had to step into the story because through his eyes,
it took him about 2 years to convince me.
Take him about, especially drawing him. When you draw somebody, and this is my experience since I was a kid, I would draw people in my classroom, all my classmates, my teachers, and everybody to a T. Everybody would be unanimous that I was a genius when it came to drawing the others.
Right.
Absolutely perfect. Me, you didn't really, I'm sorry, it's a completely it's a massacre. But the others, man, just perfect. So I always have that problem dealing with people I draw, including Pratap. Pratap keeps saying, "Well, I don't mind. I don't mind the way." I knew he didn't like it. He would say, "You can draw me any way you want." But I knew that everybody would pick up the book, would go, "Oh, this is not me," but the others you got just perfect. So I kind of twisted his arm a little bit to tell him, "You got to step into the book, and I'm going to draw you from page to page, following these important stories, meeting these important people like Lisa Ling here among us tonight."
It's funny. It's always in retrospect. Your instinct seems so spot on to me. And I don't know if you know, but Jeremy Scahill experienced something similar when I forgot the name of his photographer partner, Rick. I want to say Rick Rowley.
Rick Rowley, yeah.
Yeah, Rick Rowley.
I know Rick, yeah.
Rick had to persuade Jeremy to be part of the film version of Dirty Wars, and Jeremy didn't want it to be about him, but he just, I think, made a really persuasive argument, proven by the results of the great film based on a great book, which is that we need a narrative arc built around someone. And once, it seems to me, in retrospect, everything's always so obvious in retrospect, that once you expanded the story beyond just the whistleblowers to tie it in with this drone-based killing campaign, that no one whistleblower would be the central glue for all those different elements. And so it's
I would take me out of it and actually see it as a journalist. There are many journalists, and they have a hard job convincing their editors, and they run into roadblocks all the time. People won't talk to them. Companies won't return their calls. So we really did try to actually inject that idea of what it is like to be a journalist.
Yeah.
There's often a lot of debate. Some people call Julian Assange a whistleblower, some call him a traitor, and some call him a journalist. But he really actually is a journalist. You may not agree with him, but his job is getting documents to the public, and that's our job too.
Right.
So we're just a window in some ways. And I also think it's a little, the New York Times always does this thing about saying a reporter witnessed, when, damn it, say that it's you. Say you, because it's your
so nice to hear that.
view, right?
Yeah.
And you may not have seen the whole thing. So if you say, and you're honest about it, and you say, this is my perspective and my opinion, which skews it, people will be refreshed by that. Otherwise, they just assume it's true. And then when they find it's not true, it's a problem.
I love hearing that. It's a pet peeve of mine. I hate the phrase, this journalist. I'm like, oh, you mean I? You. Keep going. And because it's this really, I know it's become a custom, but to me it's this, it's an attempt to make something that is inherently subjective seem more objective, and I just find it irritating. Somebody wrote the story, somebody witnessed the event. That's a human being. We tend to refer to ourselves in the first person unless we have really high notions of ourselves. We say like Donald J. Trump hereby bans all that's a really bad sign when people start talking about themselves in the third person. But yeah, we say I, so just say I. Don't pretend.
He is president. Maybe we should do the same. I'm just kidding.
So I love the sweep of the story. I love how you anchor it as a journalist, tying together what you're learning from whistleblowers and at trade shows where all these corporations are out there. Obviously, the drone program itself should be of great concern to anyone with even minimal empathy, I think, or humanitarian instinct, and yet a lot of people don't really seem to care very much. What do you see as the most important parts of the overall story, the most important implications of the story? In other words, why should the average person be concerned about mass surveillance in the 21st century?
Well, as you said, even for people with minimal empathy who are under the general impression that, the drone war is not so bad because we're not exposing our people there. I mean, we can kill people from distance and forget about it. It's actually not true, as we document in the book. A lot of people who do push the button suffer a lot, but PTSD, the remorse, they can't stand it. Killing people they've observed for days and weeks and just killing them. It's not as easy as it seems.
Right.
And ultimately, blowback.